So the topic for today's satsang is God present where there is ignorance. Ignorance, delusion, Maya Shakti. It's a very powerful force in the world. And we all stay very enthralled in this illusionary drama, this web that Maya spins over us. In fact, what to say about us, even the saints, we hear in mythology, in the stories of saints, that they have worked lifetimes, years and lifetimes in trying to escape the hold, the stranglehold of Maya. But sometimes, even after getting perfect wisdom, they may fall into the trap. And what about us? A lot of us are blissfully unaware that we are in this web, because it's a golden web. It's filled with treasures, it's filled with pleasures, and we don't want to give it up. We are very happy in this golden web. And I'm sure you must have heard the story of Naradji and Vishnuji, but I'll recite it briefly. So once Naradji goes to Vishnuji, and they are having a conversation in Vaikuntha, and Naradji suddenly, during the course of his conversation, feels a compassion arising in him, and he looks down and he looks at all the people in the earth, and he says to Vishnuji, I feel so sorry for all of them. They go through their lives many times getting hurt, the same sorrows, the same pitfalls, but they keep doing it again and again to themselves, and they don't seem to have any way out. And Vishnuji just smiles in agreement. He says, yes, that's true. And they continue with their conversation. After a while, Vishnuji tells Naradji, let's go down. We haven't been to earth for a long time. Let's go and give some blessings to all of the earthlings and see if we can get them out of their misery. Naradji says, yes, Lord, we should try and do that. And they both come down to earth, and they are wandering around through all the cities and towns. They reach a deserted kind of a place which is very hot, and Vishnuji says that, Narad, I am actually tired now. Can you get me a glass of water while I rest? So Naradji says, of course, Lord, please sit under the shade of this tree. I'll get you some water. And Naradji also goes, but there's nothing to be seen, no habitation. He keeps walking for an hour, and suddenly he comes across a very beautiful city. And he says, at last, habitation, now I'll find some water for Vishnuji. And he goes into this city, and he's amazed to see so beautiful, and it's like full of gardens, and people are looking very happy, and he's very impressed that the king of this place must be very benevolent. He keeps all the people happy, he keeps his city very well, and he has that curiosity to meet the king. So he goes up to the palace and he meets the king. And the king, of course, is amazed that Brahm Rishi, Naradji, has come to visit him. He greets him with full honors and everything, with great reverence. And as they converse, the king says, please be my guest for some time. Naradji said, I've come for some water actually, but this town was so beautiful, I wanted to meet you. I basically want some water for Vishnuji and I'll leave. So the king calls for some water, and his beautiful princess comes and gives the water to Naradji. Naradji is quite again enthralled with her beauty, and then he is about to take his leave when he notices that the king's eyes look a little sad. And Narad says that, you seem to be happy, but I detect a bit of sadness in you. So the king says, yes, actually, I am. You are right. There is a bit of sadness in me. My beautiful daughter, who you just met, I haven't been able to find a worthy suitor for her, and I'm very worried. So Naradji, with great hesitation, he says, you know what, can I get married to her? So the king is surprised, and he is very, very happy, and he says, of course, I wouldn't find anybody better for her. So Naradji gets married to this princess, and they have a very happy time for many years. They have children, they are living in the palace, they are having a great time. And suddenly, one day, the flood comes into the town, comes into the city. The river overfloods, and there's a deluge. and it even comes to the palace. And Naradji tries to hold on to his children. They are all getting separated. It's dark, it's raining, stormy, but he's not able to hold on to the children, who leave his grasp one by one and get swept by the deluge. And so does his wife. Now Naradji is really sad to lose his wife, and he's sitting, he's pondering about that when the deluge sweeps him as well, knocks him unconscious and sweeps him. And then after some time he wakes up on the banks, and somebody is shaking him and waking him up from the unconsciousness. And he opens his eyes to see Vishnuji. And Vishnuji tells him, "Narad, what happened to my water? You've been gone for over 2 hours now." So Narad just opens his eyes and he's in a daze, and he realizes that it was all Vishnuji's Maya. And this is how we get trapped in the Maya world. And it just seems so pleasant and nice. It's such a strong force. Can it be anything but God? Even this ignorance, this Maya Shakti, is what has made this world. It is Shakti, Divine Mother. Her consciousness lives in this world. And if it was not for this Shakti, if it was not for this Maya, then we wouldn't be there. This creation would not be there. And you may say, maybe it's not such a bad idea. Why do we want to be here? But just think about it. A lot of us may feel sorry for some time, sorrowful sometime in the world, but do we really want to leave the world? Do we ever want to really willingly exit from this world because we enjoy it so much? Even probably at the age of 80, if I'm healthy, it would probably take a lot for me to willingly give up my body. So we are enjoying this creation, and this exists purely because of this power of delusion, of ignorance. And it is this Divine Mother's consciousness which exists everywhere. It's God's consciousness which exists in the world. In the Gita, Krishnji says, "I am in everything in the world. I am the best qualities of everything. I am the essence of everything in the world." In fact, he quotes mountains, rivers, and he says, "I am the best among them, the gods." And then he says, "I am even in the vices. I am the best among the vices," which is gambling. So where is God not in this world? But there is a counter power, fortunately for us, to ignorance, and that is Vidya, the power of knowledge, of true knowledge. And both of these powers come from God. God is the source, like electricity. The source of electricity, it doesn't decide it's going to light up a light bulb or a fan. That's up to us. And so God doesn't decide how we use His power, what power we choose to use, ignorance or light. He is just a witness. But Yogananda also says that when we choose the power of good, when we choose the power of light, God does celebrate. But yet He is a witness and gives us the free will to choose whichever power. If we choose ignorance, if we choose darkness, we do that to our consciousness. We perform bad actions and we choose unhappiness, we choose sorrow. And that is how our consciousness also goes. And if we get tired of this game and we choose light, then we choose the power, the path of true knowledge, then our consciousness starts to become light. It starts to move towards peace, towards joy. And this is not some esoteric concept. I think we have all experienced it when we came to Ananda. We've lived our lives, without meditation, without really, even trying to know what is happening, what is the truth of the world. So when we came to Ananda, right after maybe the first day of meditation, or maybe a few days of meditation, did not our consciousness start to become lighter? We started becoming more peaceful, more happier, for absolutely no reason. Our consciousness just became lighter. And that is what we do when we choose the light which exists with the darkness. Again, there's a story in mythology, maybe you've heard of Valmiki ji, who wrote the Ramayana. He's a saint, but before he was that, he was a bandit. And once when he was going on his robbery mission, he sees a saint and he's trying to rob the saint. So the saint says, okay, you can take my money, but can I talk to you once? For I just want to ask you a couple of things. So Valmiki ji says, okay, go ahead. So the saint says, why are you doing this? So Valmiki ji says, it's my duty to look after my family, and this is how I look after them. Even the Shastras say that I should do my duty. So saint says, yes, of course. But he said, Shastra also says that you will get the fruit of your action. You will have to face consequences, your karma. But since you are getting the benefit of your action is going to your family, will they share your karma? So Valmiki says, of course they will. Definitely they will. They love me very much. So saint says, go and ask them. Here, take my money, but do ask them this question. And Valmiki ji goes home, goes to his wife and asks her, do you want me to steal to provide bread to you? She says, yes. This is your duty. You need to, provide for us. Will you share my karma? Then she says, no, I will not share your karma, because how you provide it, that's up to you. That's your problem. That's your karma. Why should I partake of it? And he goes to his son, and the son says exactly the same thing. And then at that point, sudden realization, light comes into Valmiki ji, and he realizes that he has just wasted his life in darkness. And at that moment, he decides to move towards light, and he starts to meditate. In fact, the story goes, he meditates. He doesn't know how to meditate. So instead of saying Ram Ram in his meditation, he says the opposite, Mara Mara. But now that he's chosen light consciousness, he has decided to put his back towards the darkness. Now he does become enlightened. Because he chooses light, his consciousness starts to change, and he becomes an enlightened master. The writer of one of our most famous texts, which has inspired generations of all of us. So he becomes like an enlightened saint. As Hari was saying in the reading, both darkness and light exists. It's up to us what we choose to see, the darkness or open our eyes to see the light. And the reading also said that the darkness, the light lives within the darkness, but the darkness doesn't understand. So is it with us. If we see, within us lives the soul light, but it is covered in darkness. It lives in that darkness of ignorance, of body and mind limitations that we have confined ourselves to, within our egos, within our selfish actions. Again, the Gita tells us of 3 types of states of ignorance we have. The tamas, rajas and sattva. Tamas, it says, is like, the light surrounded by a womb, like a baby in a womb, very difficult to remove. And in rajas, it's like the mud covering the light. And in sattva, it's like smoke covering the light, very easily removed. Yet they are all 3 states of ignorance. And we can come out of them. Why? Because that light exists within us. Whether consciously or unconsciously, we are always moving towards the light. However tamasic we may be, in tamas we don't want to do too much action. We are more maybe, lazy, escaping action. But even the most tamasic person, he is also moving towards this joy, towards this light, because he feels by escaping this world, I am going to find light. I am going to find joy. So all of us are moving towards this light only because consciously or unconsciously we are aware of this light within. We go to dig gold only where we know there is presence of gold. We will not just go and dig anywhere else. And how do we find this light within ourselves? Most of us, if not all of us, need that help of somebody who can remove that darkness, who can remove that ignorance from us. And that is the Guru, whose name itself means the dispeller of darkness, the dispeller of ignorance. Because when we are in trouble in our lives, sometimes we are not able to see the light at that moment. But every trouble we know has light, isn't it? Every trouble has a teaching, has a jewel for us to learn. But sometimes we need the guru for that. So once Yogananji, one of the disciples of Yogananji, used to be very prone to accidents, and he comes to Yogananji and tells him, I'm very prone to accidents, all the time, something or the other is happening. So Yogananji, instead of blessing him or helping him out in any way, he just says, you have a careless attitude. And the disciple is not very happy to hear that, because he wants some kind of help from the guru. But then he's not very happy, but then he reflects, because it's the guru's words. And then he does realize that even though those accidents didn't seem to be his fault, he was just driving along and somebody rammed at him from the back. Or at one accident, he was just sitting in the parking lot and a truck rams into him. So he feels it's not his fault. But when he reflects, he realizes, yes, there was a careless attitude in me. And he starts to change that. And as he changes that, these accidents stop happening. So we also, in that trouble, in the darkness, we can also find light, because it is always shining within us. Om.
So let me start from the reading from Whispers from Eternity. It's called Banishing the Rebel King Ignorance. O mighty, mystic judge of life, I ask thee in my hall of soul stillness, what is sin? The whispers of silence, dim at first, grew into bright articulations of thought. I heard and understood thy meaning. Sin is a rebel king. His name is ignorance. Ignorance is the perpetrator of all evil, the main root of the tree of ill health, the primal cause of all error and soul blindness. King Ignorance and his army of bacteria, physical disease, mental desires, dullness and false ambition, spiritual indifference to high truths, have been devastating the nourishing harvest fields of spirituality. So Paramhansa Yogananda, in this, he says that ignorance is the root cause of all sin. And who is ignorant? He also says in the same reading, it's a long reading, I just read the first part, that everybody who seeks happiness outside himself is ignorant. Everybody who doesn't realize, does not know, who does not realize that he is made in the image of God and he is blissful in his own nature, if he doesn't know that, if he doesn't realize that, he is ignorant. Those who seek happiness or eternal joy in drugs, in wine, with other desires, ambitions, material desires, or anything, if they seek joy outside themselves, they are ignorant. But at the same time, when I read this topic, the saying came into my mind, which I have been hearing since childhood: ignorance is bliss. If ignorance is root cause of all disease, why is ignorance bliss? I also remember another comic from Calvin and Hobbes, where Calvin says that, ignorance is really bliss, because once you start knowing stuff, you will start seeing problems in them. Once you start seeing problems, you will want to fix them. So fixing problems also means that we have to change our own self. And changing our own self actually means doing things which we don't like to do. So it is better we don't know anything and we can stay ignorant. And they go off a cliff. They get into a tram and they go off the cliff. They close their eyes and they say ignorance is bliss, and they fly off a cliff, land flat on the face. And Hobbes says, I don't think I can take so much bliss. And another funny thing which crossed my mind was ignorance is bliss because if you don't know how many calories are there in the chocolate cake you eat, then of course ignorance is blissful. But spiritually speaking, ignorance is bliss to the ego. Wisdom is bliss for the soul. And where is there God when there is ignorance? Yes, it is there. God is there everywhere. God became the universe. We discussed about that in the previous week's satsang. It is like a fish crying for water because it's thirsty. That's how humans behave. And imagine a room which is well lit, but then I decide to close my eyes and then walk around. Then of course I will stumble into the furniture there, I might trip over the carpet. A lot of things could happen to I could hurt myself physically. But all I need to do is open my eyes. And in the reading, also Swami Kriyananda, although the topic was, is God there where there is ignorance, he speaks about light. He speaks about light, which Arjuna visioned, which Paramhansa Yogananda could see. And light, the dispeller of darkness, also removes ignorance, because once there is light, we won't be ignorant of what is around us, and accordingly we can maneuver around. So similarly, we can overcome our ignorance by turning ourselves towards light. And there are also degrees of ignorance. Recently, around yesterday and day before yesterday, I learnt that one of our friends made a stupid choice because of his own ignorance. And initially my reaction was anger to that. But when I was studying for the satsang, I realized that everything happens because of ignorance, and there are degrees of ignorance. Just because I am there at the 4th floor of the house and I have a greater view, I should not look down on somebody who's on the 1st floor of the house and who's not able to see as much as I'm able to see. So I should be kind. And it had a growing experience on me. And the levels of, when I thought about the degrees of ignorance, I also recollected this, how I felt in school. Because since childhood, all of us are taught that sun rises in the east and sets in the west. And then you think that sun is moving every day from east to west. And then after a couple of years later, they teach that the sun is there stationary, it is the earth which rotates. Oh my God, it almost feels like the kindergarten teacher lied to you. But that doesn't mean that student is ignorant. He is learning, he is getting there. And then even a couple of years they will teach you that no, sun is also not stationary, that's also moving around the Milky Way. In fact, pretty much everything in the universe is in movement. So there are degrees of ignorance. So right now, are we ignorant? Yes. We have not yet realized that we are souls and we are made in the image of God. But that doesn't mean that we don't have hope. And is there a way out? In Autobiography of Yogi, this is Swami Sri Yukteswar speaking to Paramhansa Yogananda after he resurrects. He says, so long as the soul of man is encased in 3 body containers sealed tightly with the corks of ignorance, he cannot merge with the sea of spirit. What is the way out? Again, it's there in Autobiography of Yogi. Outward ritual cannot destroy ignorance because they are not mutually contradictory. Shankara wrote this in the famous Century of Verses. Realized knowledge alone destroys ignorance. Knowledge cannot spring up by any other means than inquiry. Who am I? How was this universe born? Who is its maker? What is its material cause? This is the kind of enquiry referred to. The intellect has no answers for these questions. Hence, the rishis developed and evolved yoga as a technique of spiritual inquiry. The world illusion, Maya, is individually called avidya, literally not knowledge. Ignorance or delusion is called Maya. It can never be destroyed through intellectual conviction or analysis, but solely through attaining the interior state of Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Only when we attain Nirvikalpa Samadhi, we can call ourselves that we have truly attained wisdom. Until then, in the spiral staircase of awakening, there are levels where we have to cross to reach that Nirvikalpa Samadhi. And the inspirational message here is, it is not difficult to reach Nirvikalpa Samadhi. In our mind, we have a prefixed idea that Nirvikalpa Samadhi might not be possible for me in this lifetime. It's some metaphysical state. It would take a long time to reach there. But all you need to do is to open the eyes to look around the well-lit hall. That's all it takes. And also Paramhansa Yogananda said that enlightenment or freedom or liberation is 50% God's grace, 25% Guru's effort on your behalf, and 25% your effort. So if we need to reach that Nirvikalpa Samadhi, the good news is 75% of work is already done. We are already there, just 25% left. And just by opening our eyes, we can. And by practicing that techniques which are given to us, Kriya Yoga and all the techniques which are being taught here at Ananda Sangha, will help you to open that inner eye. And I'll also end this satsang with a prayer. This prayer is from the Whispers from Eternity. It's called Emerging from the Cocoon of Ignorance. I have heard thy voice, Divine Mother, saying, you have long remained enclosed in the cocoon of wrong human habits. Come out, or the silkman death come to destroy you. Cut away the delusive comfort-inducing silken cords of past habits which hold you, falsely secure in the chamber of death. Come out, cease being a blind human worm worshipping, sleeping and dreaming human weakness. Come out of your ages-old cocoon of delusion. Spread wings of eternal power and splendor through spiritualizing your ambitions. Come out, be a butterfly of eternity. Let your wings display their innate divine beauty. Let them spread out over all space, entertained by the entertaining everything, everywhere. Divine Mother calls us always, come out. And when she comes, and when we open our eyes, our inner eye to receive her, she will come, as the chant today said, with thousands of suns and moons blazing, and she will dispel our darkness and ignorance. Thank you.